Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG, and as always it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. And today's trek through a digital wasteland is done via the video game Elex. And yes, it is a Piranha Bytes title, so that means a game made by the proverbial Tootsie Pop of game developers, requiring a good deal of effort to get to the magical middle that many of us have discovered in past titles. So, does Elex, which goes out there and tries to mix fantasy peanut butter with the futuristic chocolate of other games and throws them together, pull it off? Let's find out and see, shall we? Also, a big thanks to the developer for making review code available a full 2 weeks before the embargo. It makes these things a lot easier. Elex is out October 17th and is coming for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC for the suggested retail price of $44.99. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Elex, Plague Testicles, NPC Prostate Problem Simulation, and a very respectful way of recognizing a friend. Graphics are up first. And, you know what? What would it be if not a Piranha Bytes game if it wasn't a mixed bag? First, some of these locations are absolutely epic, and not just in the middle ground between the locations, but the major cities themselves, which I'm sure we've all noticed many times cease to inspire, with a couple ramshackle shops and 5 NPCs somehow driving an entire robust economy that a player feeds from like a figuratively swollen golden tit. Here in Elex, though, you have these sprawling cityscapes, and I do mean sprawling. The first place you explore is the home of the Berserkers, men and women who despise the use of technology so much that when you pull out your Casio wristwatch, they start threatening you with bodily harm and yelling at you to turn it off like a cell phone in a movie. Their city is this incredibly multi-stage arboreal affair with winding pathways, huge cultivated fields, and an attention to game design that is actually pretty amazing and mixes the narrative with it. For example, the Outlaws Desert Outpost. It's high atop a series of rock pillars. It makes any town in the Fallout series look positively small by comparison as well. And while not fully fleshed out with the number of NPCs I think we'd probably want to see if it was real, its number is far higher than most cities in other games, and filled with both named and generic characters that go about their lives in this interesting interplay of the narrative with the location again. For example, men and women who've come to power in this city claim small throne-like locations around town. The Junkman with his salvaged chair on a pile of steel, or the backstabbing rogue with a small guarded sanctuary walled up on all sides, or the main leader living inside what looks like an ancient cooling tower for a reactor, surrounded by delicious babes, backed up by scientists, and with his own inventor on staff at all times. It just works, and it shows that it doesn't require hundreds of interlaced connections to do something like this, just well-placed ones with a narrative that reflects it in some of what you're seeing. Now, to me, Elex is one of the most interesting and intricate lands to explore, and to me ranks up there with any other game from these guys, as well as from the AAA developers. These large cities, for example, the clerics and their futuristic holdings and neon signs, down to some podunk landowner with a house and a couple vegetables to call his own, and watching him warm himself by the fire at night, sit and eat with farmhands during the evening, go to sleep, and then rise before dawn is really pretty damn cool. Also, the game is helped dramatically by a well-done lighting engine that makes weather effects pop a bit more than I actually expected. Are some of these done in other games? Yes, they are, but not in a land so interesting. All that being said, even after a small amount of time in the game world, you're going to begin to feel like you're visiting the Koresh compound before everyone realized he was insane, because Sally, Martha, Melissa, Janet, Gertrude, and Beelzebub all look like they got squeezed from the same set of absurdly overused loins. And I don't just mean overall, I mean hair choice, facial reconstruction, pretty much everything. While not at all the only game to do something like this, I would say it's far more egregious than even Bethesda titles, and due to the lack of headgear on many of these characters, it's even more noticeable. Also, man, the game is replete with very low detail textures, or low detail geometry, making some locations look rough as hell, and showing that depending on budget, sometimes a game of this size has to pull punches from somewhere else, making it look like you're embarking on a microscopic journey over someone's Lego landscape versus playing a title. Also, when it comes to animation, it's a bit give and take. For example, the nuanced head sway of the character really adds to a feeling of weight and inertia that surprisingly we still see some games not able to replicate. And I gotta say, there are few things cooler than watching a comrade jetpack down behind you as you're leapfrogging across a lava-covered apartment complex towards a giant red swelled-up ballsack. Now, when it comes to performance, both consoles try to hit 30 FPS, but neither actually hits it all the time, and the PS4 goes for a 1080p resolution, but it looks like the Xbox One might be a little bit lower or dynamic. The PC with the i7 and the NVIDIA 1080, 4K at 60 FPS is going to be easily doable with 1 or 2 settings lowered, and the only hits it's really going to see is with the fog effects that seem to eat up more FPS than I felt were fair. As a package, Elex offers one of the largest and interesting and vertically inspired world locations I have played in a game in years, and it packs the in-between places with things that I want to visit and people I want to kill. But like everything where design trumps technical ability, it also has every one of the weaknesses and problems you would expect from a game that does all that. Sound music, and voice.
Yes, you're right. Let's destroy the converters and weaken Xacor.
And it must be us who does it. We must lead the process that stops the Alexiters.
And you know what? Let's do voice first. Hey, I got an idea. Let's splurge for pretty much everything to be voice acted, and then just go to Radio Shack, buy a speak and spell, and do it all with that. And no, not just the main character, who at least has some small reason why he sounds emotionally neutered, but most of them. Luckily, there are a few standouts, like the short-lived cannibal leader, who didn't last very long, but sounded subtly scary while dying, or a couple of the leaders in the clerics areas. The end result is a game where everybody sounds pretty much better than the main character, even despite the fact that you're supposed to pretty much sound like that in the first place. Overall, I would say it's a bit hit and miss. Sound. Now, this is also hit and miss. Now, some of the samples are excellent, like moving through the bush or the thick, heady explosions of a rocket-propelled projectile aimed to end lives at your feet, or even the scramble and crackle of creatures moving above you in rocky locations. You can hear all that, and the surround is actually fairly well done, or even the excellent effects of the rush of a waterfall as you twist and turn down a path next to it, and the occlusion is actually handled really well. Unfortunately, there's also an incredible number of, well, just terrible effects. For example, some of the running sounds feel like someone said, "Hey, what's running sound like?" And another person said, it sounds like psh, 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 and didn't know that the first person had a Tascam recorder in their hand. Or just the terrible and grating sound of sand in this game. First, it pumps out at like 40 times as loud as it should be, and apparently sand in this world is just rice in a Tupperware bowl being shuffled around. Hit and miss. Music. So this is suitably epic, but also incredibly generic at the same time. Now, that doesn't mean it won't work for many folks, and it has the requisite big celebratory fantasy tracks, but none of them really grabbed me and said, "Hey, here, you need to listen to this." Sometimes it fades out, which I liked, but most of the time when it was playing, I just sort of ignored it. And of course, that brings us to gameplay and a bit about the story. Now, Elex is based in a world somewhat like Earth if a giant meteorite struck Earth and happened to also deliver its celestial power sperm onto humans in the form of a material known as Elex that has magical-like properties. Throughout the years, a couple factions have risen to power in this new world. The Berserkers, who hate technology and use Elex sparingly and never really consume it. The Outlaws, who've Tina Turnered themselves into a Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome kind of lifestyle. The Clerics, who basically embrace technology wholeheartedly. And the Albs, who hoover vacuum up as much Elex as possible, but sadly found out that it stunts them emotionally, apparently bleaches their skin of color, and makes them downright terrible people. Elex starts out with you, the main character, getting shot out of the sky in a skyship while on a mission. Now, as an Alb, your normal intake of Elex is removed, and after a couple days, your forced detox has allowed you to see the world a bit differently, and thus starts the adventures. You meet new people, try to find out who shot you out of the sky, and basically kill as much as possible. And I'm not lying about that, because apparently most of this involves the main character Teddy Roosevelting through the friggin' wildlife like he single-handedly wants to see if extinction can happen one bird at a time. Now, as you adventure, you can also gain allies who have their own quests and motivations for helping or possibly hindering you. You can change the entire way some cities run, and as you unlock the mysteries of the world and slowly garner the respect, hate, or admiration of the groups running the world, you're presented with the option to join one of them, but only one of them. Now, if Elex is anything, it's massive, and I mean that. It's not some arbitrary digital measuring tape fans use to decide if something's worth buying, like 10,000 square miles of shit is somehow worth more than 1 square foot of diamonds. But in both its interactivity and its verticality. I upgraded villages, I moved bases from the original fire beside a building to a nice little hacienda with a number of people living there and the ability to add traders and perform quests. Just one more hill has got to be the tagline for this game. Sadly, Battle doesn't support this. Either outfitted with hand-to-hand weapons, range, throwbores, or otherwise, regardless of the weapon, it always feels very janky, something that sadly this dev is well known for. Attack is with 2 buttons, weak and strong. Defending is with another that soaks up some damage, while items can be hot-buttoned onto both the controller digital pad or the keyboard numpad. Now, one cool thing is the mixture of cultures here. I was soon running along with a chainsword and a shield, some health potions, but then I also had a set of potions I got from the clerics that summoned a gun-toting drone to target enemies, and I love that mixture. Unfortunately, combat just never feels right. Some enemies don't react at all to being hit, and many times those that do have an odd delayed reaction, like the animation blending isn't done correctly. And in this day and age, when games are getting better and better and delivering kinetic information to the player, it feels like one hand's tied behind your back at all times. Now, when battling, you can perform combos with the weapons that do progressively more damage, and man, you need to make sure you hit those, because they can be the difference between seeing the next cutscene and seeing the ending scene very easily. Weapons run from single to double-handed, as well as guns that have ammo and you can run out. Also, I have to say, I love the way the game lets everyone just battle. I've had enemies split off for me to fight other creatures and used that to finish quests many times. There's one particular quest where you're challenged with a hugely one-sided battle, so I ran off, got another comrade, got some enemies, and kited them back into the battle, and got the quest giver even to jump in as well. There's a fantastic flexibility here that you're going to find in all the quests. Also, while enemies do respawn, it's a nice long time, and they respawn in general areas with some mix-ups, meaning that you can return to a spot and see no monsters or a different kind of monster off the beaten path, and it's noticeable compared to other games that feel like they have a bad guy friggin' generator hidden in a molehill somewhere. Now, regardless of how you do it, as you explore and kill, you're going to gain experience, which allows for you to raise your attributes, as well as a very deep list of skills, most of them blocked off by requisites into attributes, as well as having to be taught by instructors that many times will also be in the major cities of choice. This means that for most, just raising, say, strength won't allow for you to use a number of items in the game world without also upgrading another stat, and I dig that requirement. Connected also to the stats is a fairly robust crafting system, which allows for you to create new weapons, improve old ones, and outfit those that you can with socketed jewels for some incredibly powerful bonuses. Now, one absolutely wonderful element to Elex is the quests, which I mentioned a little bit before. They just work. The flexibility offered is really next level here. I mean, I had quests in right because I threatened people. I convinced them to side with me. I convinced other NPCs to basically do my quests for me. I've installed leaders into power positions and then became known as the power behind the Iron Throne. The number of ways you can move forward in combat or in quests in Elex is really actually quite large, and many choices are, like the skills, based on stats. And I have to say, no stat seems throwaway here. Even something like cunning for, say, a warrior-style player can be well worth it because you may upgrade it so that it can help you through some of the missions. Sadly, the AI doesn't really back that up. Listen, this isn't like Johnny Five from the Short Circuit movies. It's more like strapping a tank tread to a Casio keyboard, duct tape and googly eyes and a sword to it and calling it a robot. For example, your AI companions have a chance of just never attacking enemies even when you're getting hit. You can get smited 5 or 6 times, and they're incredibly happy to just skippity-doo-dah beside you as you perish, like a bad tag team partner pulling their hand away when you try to get out. Or worse yet, they're fighting with you, and then they just put their sword away and walk around in a circle as you're being trounced. While you're looking at 40 to 50 hours if you play the quests with some side quests, the game would take a great deal longer if you want to do everything or just explore. And as a package, I have to say, I have a ton of issues with Elex, but I think this world and the uniqueness there is right up with some of the classics. Fun factor. Listen, every damn Piranha Bytes game comes out, it feels like it's stuck in friggin' customs for 2 years before it gets to us. And I get that, and many of us speak about that Piranha Bytes feel. I do have to say, this is the longest it ever took me to start to feel it. It's probably because Elex is the largest and certainly the most ambitious of their titles, but its slow start and its poor overall starting location just doesn't do a very good job at introducing you to this game world. Once it does open up, though, the magic was noticeable. Elex does take a long time to get into, but once you do, there's a lot of fun to be had. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale, with rent being replaced by deep sale on the PC. This is actually a wait for sale, even at $44, and the reason why is really this. I love the magic in this title, but the AI absolutely tremendously hurts it, and it really needs to be fixed because the exploration is super fun. The problem is that it's held back by some really bad AI, some odd animations, some weird collision detection, and other issues. I mean, I just can't really recommend it at full price until we get a patch. Where other titles have grabbed me despite these issues and in less time, for the normal consumer, that first 8 to 12 hours is gonna be rough as hell, and far rougher, I think, than even their past titles. So that's it for me. I hope you liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Maybe check out Twitter or Patreon. That's how I continue to give you guys reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap, and there's some cool swag as well. And if you didn't like the video, give it a thumbs down. Peace out, and enjoy the rest of your week.